Welcome to Wisconsin in Focus. I'm Benjamin Yant, filling in for J.D. Davidson, who once again has the day off. The recall effort against 4 Milwaukee Public School Board members is over. For now. Kinda. This is, again, one of the stories in Milwaukee that is so much more than just the story. You remember advocates and activists launched a recall effort against 4 of the city's elected school board members, including the school board president and one of the citywide school board members, after news broke that Milwaukee Public Schools had a massive financial crisis that was ignored, kept quiet, silenced until after April's vote on a $250 million tax increase. Once that tax increase was approved, then all of a sudden you saw headlines about how Milwaukee Public Schools were failing financially, had failed to turn in required state reports, were on the cusp of losing millions of dollars in federal Head Start money. Then all of that happened. The state came in and said, if you don't turn in these reports, we're going to have to claw back money. The federal government, in essence, canceled Milwaukee's Head Start program, which meant a summer of different classes for parents of young kids in the city. And the superintendent resigned. There is now a new interim superintendent. And parents across Milwaukee became very, very angry at the school board, either for one, covering for all of this mess, or two, not telling them ahead of the time when everybody went out and voted. Perhaps the vote would have been different had people understood just how desperate Milwaukee's financial situation was. This recall effort was never really very serious. Recall elections in Wisconsin are becoming more and more common, but they are very, very, very serious work. The City Forward Collective, which was the organization that tried to recall these board members, always took it as a sort of laissez-faire idea. Well, we're going to get the signatures. How are we going to do it? Well, we're going to get the signatures. We're going to talk to people. How are we paying for this? Well, we've got some anonymous donors who are helping out. No need for you to ask too many questions. We wrote the story last week that the Wisconsin Elections Commission counted up those signatures and realized that the collective was thousands of signatures short when it came to being able to recall the 3 of the 4 local school board members. This week, we wrote the story after it became official that the collective was thousands of signatures short of recalling the citywide school board member as well. But like I said, with this story, it is never just the story. It's about this story and that 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 story and this story. And this week, the story we wrote over at the Center Square was with the Milwaukee Teachers Education Association. That's the big teachers union in the city of Milwaukee, demanding answers about just how this collective came to be, who was supporting it, and how they failed so desperately. The quote we used in the story, the people of Milwaukee have emphatically rejected this dishonest effort to remove good public servants from our democratically elected school board, said MTEA President Ingrid Walker-Henry. Recalls were all the rage this year. Just on a side note, there were 2 recall efforts launched against Assembly Speaker Robin Vos by his conservative opponents. They didn't think that Vos is conservative enough, and so they launched their own recall effort. When one of them failed, again, didn't get enough signatures, they launched a second, which, again, didn't get enough signatures. So recall efforts, even when you have a concentrated effort, even when it's just a small legislative district, they're very difficult to pull off. And no one was surprised that this Milwaukee school collective failed when it came to the number of signatures. The interesting part here is who the teachers union is blaming. Again, back to the statement from the Milwaukee Public School Teachers Union. The public faces of this recall effort were a private voucher school teacher and the founder of a now shuttered private charter school. They claimed to represent a broad grassroots movement. It became clear in late July, however, there were indications that anonymous forces were working behind the scenes, including a resigned former school board member, and according to campaign literature distributed by one canvasser, City Forward Collective, an organization which supports taking taxpayer money intended for public schools and diverting it to unaccountable private voucher and charter schools. Milwaukee is the home of school choice in Wisconsin. Under Governor Tommy Thompson in the 1990s, Wisconsin lawmakers opened up the idea of choice. You don't have to send your kid to the failing local public school. Choice schools have gained traction and popularity across Milwaukee, across Wisconsin, and across the country ever since. And in fact, as we write often over at the Center Square, when you look at the test scores, when you compare apples to apples with Milwaukee kids, low-income kids from the same neighborhoods, when those kids go to a choice school, they do much better when it comes to reading, writing, math, even simply attending school than kids who go to Milwaukee Public Schools. The teachers union in Milwaukee, as you would expect, hates the idea of school choice. And so the idea that somehow, somewhere, there's this shadowy school choice movement behind this recall effort and not genuine outrage at someone hiding a multi-million-dollar financial scandal, it adds another layer back to the statement from the union. From the beginning, when libelous assertions were made about MPS and the union, we have been alarmed at the clear anti-public education motive of these recall efforts, Walker Henry said. Despite their embarrassing failure to submit adequate signatures, the people of Milwaukee should remember this campaign was fueled by individuals and groups whose sole vision of education in Milwaukee is complete privatization. Now, in another life at another job, I'm fond of saying two things can be true at the same time. And in this case, two things appear to be true at the same time. Yes, some of the people involved in the recall effort may have ties to voucher schools or to charter schools or to the idea of school choice, but that doesn't make the accusations, that doesn't absolve Milwaukee's elected school board members of any responsibility that they have of telling the public about just how bad Milwaukee schools are. After all, Milwaukee taxpayers just signed on for $250 million in property tax increases over the next several years. If they would have known that perhaps throwing more money after bad was not going to fix Milwaukee's problematic public schools, maybe they would have said no and forced some reforms. Milwaukee schools do not yet have a permanent superintendent. In fact, there's an interim superintendent that will guide the school district through this year and a permanent superintendent that will be hired in about a year. City school districts also, by the way, have not finished those required state reports. One of them was due in September of last year, which means, in all likelihood, they will be a year late. Milwaukee Public Schools have already lost $17 million in Head Start money, and the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, DPI, says by the time this is all over, MPS could lose as much as $50 million in state support. So this is not a story that is over. This is not an issue that is done. While the recall effort has fallen flat, the rest of the story remains to be seen. And as it unfolds, we'll write about it. You can find that story and all of ours over at thecentersquare.com. Thank you for listening to Wisconsin in Focus. I'm Benjamin Young. And please don't forget to subscribe.